Hello, welcome to my channel. I am Jask from Poemerlin Cosplay, and today I'm going to be sharing the entire process that I went through to create my Julian costume for the Arcana Cosplay contest for this year. It was a bit of a last-minute decision, and I made the entire thing in about 4 or 5 days. But considering how quickly I ran through it, it did not turn out half bad at all. Throughout the video, I will go into a little bit more detail on what I did to make the costume, so I hope you enjoy it. I made the Julian costume out of a bunch of fabric that I already had sitting around the house that we just accumulated over years and years of costuming and crafting. I honestly don't think I would have gone through with the Julian costume if we didn't have all of this stuff just laying around the house. So I used a failed attempt at a Reno jacket lining for the body of Julian's coat. This red stuff I think used to be like a tablecloth or something. Someone gave it to me, and then the gold was leftover fabric from a Captain Hook cosplay from years ago. And then we had like 10,000 yards of faux suede that we used for Organization 13 Kingdom Hearts costumes. So I was going to use that to make the gloves and eye patch. So step one was taking that failed Reno jacket lining and salvaging whatever I could from it. Unfortunately, the only thing that I could use were the sleeves, so I took those right off and ended up using the remains of the jacket to make the front panel for my new Julian jacket. For the body, I had to take the pattern that I did use for the Reno jacket, and I just sort of messed with it a little bit to give it a collar and make it the appropriate length. I also cut out a red lining for the inside. Then I took all that stuff to the sewing machine. Then cue me spending far too long pinning sleeves to the jacket. I took the yellow fabric and I hemmed both sides to get a really nice, ribbony looking effect, and then folded that on both sides of the hem of the Julian jacket that I had put together, and that was the hem. I would have preferred something more like silver toned, but we're just working with what we got, and it turned out pretty nice. So this is me putting it on, making sure that it fits, and I also marked where the buttons were going to go. For the pants, I don't know how to draft pants, so I took a pair of sweats that fit me pretty well, traced them, and used that as my pants pattern. Flipped them one way, flipped them the other way, traced both sides, and then took that stuff to the sewing machine to get it all together. And Julian's got these like arrow patterns on his pants, so I just free-handed half of it and traced that onto the pants and then mirrored the other side and then stuck that through the sewing machine as slow as possible to get these very neat looking hems on the front. I don't know how visible they're going to be on the final product, but it's nice to have them there anyway. All that was left was adding some final touches to the pants after hemming them all properly. So I cuffed the bottoms and sewed those bad boys together. Not half bad for throwing together just a guesswork pants pattern. They seem pretty alright. Then it was time for the gloves and that center wrap cincher thing that Julian wears. And also the boot covers. I started with the thing that he wears around his waist. I don't know what the correct term for it is. Cummerbund, cincher, waist wrap, corset, I don't know. but I decided that by itself it was too flimsy, so I cut out another piece of the red lining and stitched it all together. I also don't have footage of it, but I decided to go through and add some eyelets, and I turned the center bit into a corset. Unfortunately, this kind of fabric could not go through the sewing machine because I don't have the right kind of needle, it just catches, so I spent like an hour hand sewing the hem. I also found when I was going through all of my stuff, this like, I don't even know what it is. This curtainy, weird, stringy, tassel-y thing, it was perfect for the tassels that I needed for Julian. So I struggled to cut those evenly, as you can see. It was quite ridiculous. But, in the end, it turned out pretty well. We also had a bunch of rope lying around, so my sister took some black dye and dyed a white rope for me, and I hot glued the long tassels to it, and boom! I had the tassel-y ropes that go around Julian's midsection. Next was the boot covers. Similar to how I made the pants, I took a pair of old pants and traced them to get the pattern for the boot covers. Then I added a little triangle at the bottom for where the shoes would go through, and put this through the sewing machine as usual. Next, I took the shoes that I was going to cover with these boot covers and measured some elastic going around the bottom to make sure that I would have the proper length. I cut those out and once again couldn't put this side of the fabric through the sewing machine, so I hand sewed the elastic on. Then I went about making those little panels of boot whatever that he's got on top of his shoes, and I just used some 5mm craft foam to do that. I cut it at an angle and then traced the patterns onto more faux suede, cut those out with a little bit of room on the edge, and then glued the heck out of them. I just used regular, like, Elmer's rubber cement, and I folded the suede onto both sides, and I got this very nice, smooth finish. Then I went and got some eyelets, more foam, and a strap because I ran out of elastic, and I just hot glued some eyelets into it, popped it over the boot, made some adjustments, and then here's me putting on the boot cover the wrong way because I wasn't thinking about it. But it's on, and it works. Nice and secure. And then I went back later and I replaced the eyelets because I realized they didn't match. And here they are on. And they work pretty well. They stay up just fine. I don't have to have any additional support on the top. Not half bad. And next was the gloves. I think I made like 4 different gloves before I got it right. I just have very poor luck with gloves. But in the end I got it. They're a little loose in some places, but you know, I can put them on, I can take them off. It's an effective glove. I win. Then I had to add more eyelets onto everything, but for some reason, it just wasn't working. I had gotten the first 4 on the front panel the day before, but it just wasn't working now, so I resorted to hot gluing everything in again. And that seemed to work just fine. Originally, the opposite side of the clasps I had sewn in. However, the threads would snap every time the buttons would close, so I was going to remove all of those and hot glue everything back on. But before I did, I decided to cut off the excess fabric that was on the bottom of the jacket and hem it all nice and neat. When that was done, I went through every single clasp, cut it off, and hot glued it where it needed to be. It seemed to work just fine. Everything could clasp together just fine, and it was nice and secure. It was buttoning and unbuttoning just fine, as long as I was careful and I wasn't yanking on them anyway. And then I tried the whole thing on for the first time. This was kind of loose, and I did end up making a couple of adjustments, but not bad for a first pass. Then for the eye patch, I did what any normal person does, and I put a piece of fabric against my face and traced where the eye patch was going to need to be, because I wasn't about to guess. And that seemed to work. So I took some 5mm craft foam, cut out the shape, and then did the same thing that I did with the weird boot things. I cut out a little triangle in the center so that I could get it to be more of a round shape. Found some elastic that we again just had lying around, and just did the same process that I showed earlier. Put rubber cement on both sides and folded everything over. I made extra sure that there were no bumps, no bubbles or anything in it, and I took a lot of care with this, as you can see. There ended up being a lot of excess fabric, but it's always better to have excess than to have too little, so I cut off all of the extra fabric and then ended up folding back some of those pieces that I had glued down to fit the elastic band in there, which I just hot glued because that was convenient. I did get hot glue all over my fingers, but that's just part of the job. When it was done, I had a nice, usable eye patch. Then it was on to the wig. The wig, as is, was pretty good. Didn't have any tangles, but it was a little bit too shiny, so I wanted to get rid of that as much as I could, which is why I gave it a good old-fashioned fabric softener bath for a few hours. I filled a stainless steel pot with some water and some fabric softener and then let the wig soak in it for a couple of hours. When it was done, I took it out, rinsed it off, and towel dried it as best as I could before taking it to the hairdryer. I wasn't really concerned with the longevity of the curls from the original wig, because let's be honest, if the curls fell out, I could have just taken a curling iron to it and got them all back. So I wasn't worried. But luckily, the curls didn't go away at all, so that made my life a whole lot easier. Julian's wig has a longer and more in-depth video all on its own, so I will leave a link to that here. But step one was brushing out the wig because there was all kinds of knots in it from the towel drying. But when that was done, I moved on to sectioning, cutting, and eventually spiking what little areas needed to be spiked. When I was done, I sprayed it with a bunch of hairspray and called it a day. And here is the full Julian cosplay in all of his glory. Hello again, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look into the process that I went through for Julian's jacket and all the other goodies that he has. And if you have any questions about some of the methods that I used or more specific details on parts of the costume itself, please don't be afraid to leave me a comment down below. If you like what you see and you would like to see more of my content, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @Poemerlin, or you can support me on Patreon. Patrons get early access to content like this video, photography, work in progress shots, all kinds of stuff. Patrons also get access to patterns and everything that I use to make my costumes and props, like this little bad boy. If you've played the Arcana enough, you might recognize this little dude. It was part of one of those special little illustrations from Julian's route, and it lights up and everything. Woo. Patrons get access to how-tos for things like this, too. So if you're interested in seeing more, please consider supporting me there as well. And speaking of patrons, shout out to Quinn, whose contribution helped pay for this cosplay. Thank you so much, and as always, you have my eternal gratitude. To see more content as soon as it hits YouTube, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. As always, I appreciate your time and attention for watching this video. Once again, I am Jask from Arcana Cosplay, and I hope to see you next time. Have a good one.